Hi guys, I'm Jason Kriege. I am Senior Vice President at Northern Bank. I run our commercial lending division. And I just want to thank you guys for letting us come out and do this presentation today. We got Big Greg, who's our Chief Information Officer, who's going to present today, and Katie Bates, who runs our electronic banking division. So we're just happy to be here. I'm glad that you guys have given us this opportunity, and hopefully you'll find it informative. If you have any questions, these guys will field anything you have. So thank you.
Thanks for the introduction. I don't know if we'll be able to field every question, but we're sure going to try. Thanks, first of all, for having us. It's an honor and a pleasure to be able to present to you today, and thank you for joining us online as well, remotely. As you mentioned, my name is Benjamin Craig. I am Executive Vice President, Chief Information Officer at Northern Bank, which basically means that I oversee everything that has a microchip in it that doesn't make copy, which is quite a bit of a distraction. I'm joined today with Katie, who runs our entire electronic channel division, which includes online banking, our call center, and our card services department. And really, this is all about your benefit. We want to talk about information security and how you can mitigate risk within your personal and professional lives, and some of the tools and tricks and trades that we've been able to come up with in order to minimize our overall risk profile and make us less of an attack surface, because there is no silver bullet when it comes to protecting yourself against hackers or the criminally insane or the folks that have turned malware into an industry. And make no mistake, it is an industry. About 10 years ago, the criminal organizations started branching off into what I would call a very tech-savvy mafia. And obviously, state agencies, countries, and organized crime have now got actual HR departments for their criminal activities. They hire, they recruit, they retain. They have 401ks and health benefits for hackers. I kid you not. And that's kind of a scary prospect when you think about the legitimacy of such an industry, the complexity of such an industry. And so we all ask ourselves, what can we do in order to protect ourselves? Well, we've got a few ideas, and we're definitely willing to share them with you. As it turns out, we also are doing training for our board this month. So I took a few notes that we're going to be integrating into our board presentation, and I'll be willing to share those in addition to our presentation. So you get the expanded version, for better or worse. And let me know how it goes, because, I'm trying out my material on you, and that way if it bombs, you'll have to put it on the board.
We're gonna.
So first of all, we categorize our threats into really 6 different areas. Physical threats, which includes the most prevalent form of hacking, and that is dumpster diving. Low tech is still the easiest way to get a hold of people's data. When you don't shred things, or when you leave your computer unlocked, or when people have physical access to things, it's amazing how much you can hack. As part of our internal security training, we do a day-long class, computer emergency response team class, where we train people how hackers think and what they're looking for. And during our lunch, we take a 2-hour lunch so that we can go out and visit other peer institutions and observe their security practices. Not trying to hack other banks and credit unions, mind you, but just observe how did they respond to security. And what we found was not shocking, and this is up here in Anchorage as well as in Fairbanks, as well as where I came from most recently 10 years ago, which is Northern California, Sacramento. You'd be amazed at how many financial institutions leave their backs of their computers exposed, where you could just snap a thumb drive or a USB device right onto the computer. And how many banks, because they want to be customer service friendly and customer service centric, will allow customers to sit down and use their computer to check mail or to retrieve a document or something. That's obviously not a great practice, because as we a bank, we've got to control those assets in order to make sure that they stay safe. And the same thing applies to your businesses. If you leave your computers exposed where somebody can physically touch the computer, or you allow guests, customers, to use your computer infrastructure, even if you're watching them, they may go to a URL, just go to a web page, pull up the site that automatically downloads malware that your virus software can't detect. That would be a horrible thing, but it's one of the most likely ways somebody can infect your network. And it takes no talent, because you don't have to go past the firewalls. You don't have to have a tremendous amount of sophistication to do it. So unauthorized network access, whether it's wired or wireless. How many of you have guest wireless networks. So if you have a guest wireless network, the question then is, do you have it configured to be completely segmented from your internal network? If the answer is yes, that means that they can't ping, they can't touch, they can't scan for any additional resources on your network. A lot of people have two different wireless networks, but they actually on the back end converge to the same network, which is bad. Because if they can use your printer, if they can use your file services, if they can ping your other devices, that means they're essentially on your network. And that means that whatever they've got on their computer, you now probably have on your computer if it's malicious. Mobile devices is another one. We generally have some ambiguity when it comes to mobile devices. Frankly, Apple devices are less vulnerable than Android devices because of the way that Apple has a walled garden. I'm a big fan of the Android hardware. I think the fact that you can do so many cool geeky things with it is cool, but the bottom line is Apple devices tend to be a bit more secure. That's a both double-edged sword. It's a good and bad thing. If you don't like being part of the Apple pack, then you probably have a religious feelings about Android, and for that I respect you, but just putting it out there. Bear in mind, if you're running on Android, you probably are running software that isn't as frequently patched and is probably more vulnerable than Apple devices. Another category for us is regulatory. You know, we actually spend an entire business quarter getting audited and examined. We get hit by the FDIC, which is part of the FFIEC, which also governs the NCUA. We also get, as a publicly traded company, SOX, and we pay to have black hat, white hat, gray hat hackers come in, scan our network looking for vulnerabilities, and give us an assessment of what our topology looks like and how good a job we're doing, both with our vulnerabilities and our general controls. The entire process takes about 3 months out of the year, and it's excruciating, and the reason I have white hair. For you, if you take credit cards, you too are under a regulatory format, and it's probably the PCI. So bear in mind that if you take payment forms, you have regulatory obligations, and that comes with all kinds of strings. If there's ever a breach, your liability, your insurance could be impacted by whether or not you are adhering to those PCI regulations. Another type of threat would be internal threats. This is an insider threat program. It involves disgruntled employees. It involves careless employees. It involves employees with the best of intentions that just leave things open, right? If they walk away from their computer and leave it exposed in your office, you know, there's certainly no malintent there, but frankly, that's how most of the hackers are able to jump on the network without even trying. They just sit down and they're already logged in. So it's really important. The most bang for our buck has been having a computer awareness, security awareness training. And that's just sitting down with your employees and coworkers and just having a conversation like this one to talk about what those threats mean. Because generally, if people understand the threats, they tend to be more compliant and they get it. They understand why it protects them and why it's in their best interest. In that particular example, if, for example, Katie were to leave her computer unlocked and I were to sit down and do things like send off emails, authorizing wires or perhaps giving myself a raise or whatever the case may be.
Good luck with that one.
It would show under her login, right? It would show in the audit logs that she was logged in. And if I didn't have any other means, like surveillance or some form of an alibi for Katie, then according to everything that's written down on paper, she's going to be on the hook with that with law enforcement. And so helping your employees understand that usually gets them to buy into some of the practices that you want them to be able to take into account. Human error is a huge one, and that kind of couples in with social engineering. Is anybody unfamiliar with the term social engineering? It's okay if you are. So social engineering, there's a great movie out there, Catch Me If You Can, has Tom Hanks and Leonardo DiCaprio. How many of you have seen that movie? It's an outstanding film about a con man, and he con standing for confidence, gains the confidence of pretty much every industry you can think of. He pretends he's a doctor, he ultimately pretends he's an airline pilot and flies all over the world for free with a dozen stewardesses behind him, and this is in the 60s, and so he's got swagger and, a nice looking uniform, and finally the FBI catches up with him. Well, that's the the earliest form of social engineering. It's basically getting you to do something that you probably shouldn't do by being overly charming and gregarious. And it's so easily done. In fact, we show a video to our employees that has the famous hacker Kevin Mitnick on it doing a live social engineering hack at the DEF CON hacker conference in Nevada. He's up on stage and everybody is in on the joke in the audience. There's about 1,000 people in the audience and they've got this playing through the speakers. And he says, "Hi, I'm Bill, I'm with the help desk. I was told by," and he knew the help desk person's name, which is easy enough to come by through a company directory. "I was told by Tom that I'm going to be working on your computers now so that you don't have to come in this weekend." Obviously, he's making it, what's in it for them. "Oh yeah, sure, you can use my computer for 5 minutes. Okay, what's your user ID? Got it. Okay, now you should just click on this web page, type in blah, blah, blah.com. And he does. And by doing so, you can watch on another screen what's happening in the background. It's launching an attack, it's making a connection, and it's giving remote control to the hackers live on the stage. The guy is just being as nice as can be, and all he did was click on a link as directed by who he thought was working on behalf of his help desk. And before you know it, his entire system and thus network is compromised, because once they're behind the firewall, they're in. And for all those hundreds of thousands, or in some cases millions of dollars of security equipment that you pay for, that your companies pay for, that you implement, bottom line is that one employee allows a hacker through all of those things, through legitimately open ports, you're compromised. So again, security awareness training and getting people to kind of understand that is really important. We recently this year implemented an anti-phishing campaign with the help of a third-party vendor. They do their best to try and make sneaky-looking emails sent out from legitimate-sounding people and send it to all of our employees to try and get them to click on it. And if they do, we don't beat them over the head. We automatically enroll them for additional training, and we have levels of escalation. And as you can imagine, if they do it more than once, there's more repercussions. And by the time you get to the third time, there's going to be lots of meetings with lots of people with initials in front of their names in the HR department. Ultimately, we're probably going to have to terminate if somebody ever gets to that highest level. But it's all for your benefit. It's all for our customers' benefits. It's to help keep one of the most trusted industries left in this world, banking, secure. So can't say enough about the importance of training, the importance of getting people's buy-in, and the importance of having conversations so that people understand those threats out there. And the last one is, and it's a threat to all of us, especially in Alaska, recruiting and retention. IT talent, according to Bill Popover at the EDC, it's a talent puddle, not a talent pool. And I can tell you, when I recruit for IT people, it takes me a year sometimes to find the right person with the right acumen, the right talent. So that it's a threat that we have to respond to. And to that end, we've started the Anchorage Technology Forum. It's free and open to the public. Anybody who is interested in learning more about technology or solving the world's problems over a pint of beverage and appetizers, we generally get together once a month and try to put our heads together. One of the things that we were focusing on initially, and we still have carried through, is how to recruit, retrain, attract people to the state of Alaska in the field of technology. So we actually partnered with UAA and the Anchorage School District and helped create a new course curriculum for King Tech College. You may have heard about it in the news. It's the local high school that has a new charter this year. And we developed a curriculum, and we actually have 2 classes starting this semester, and we bring them over for field trips, and we help write the course curriculum. And the idea is we want to grow talent here in Alaska, get more people involved in security and technology. So I'm pitching it because if any of you have technology challenges you're interested in, it's a great place to meet other people who may face similar challenges and to try and pull together resources. And it's free and openly available. So with that, we're going to transition a little bit to B2B threats. Unfortunately, our customers are also a threat to us. Again, a double-edged sword. We love our customers, but we could have all the most amazing security apparatus in the world on our online banking, and it'd be rock solid secure, but if the computer that is used to access that online banking is compromised, then the transaction is compromised. And there's nothing that we can do about it. It's so frustrating. In fact, over the past 10 years, we've probably had a total of 7 incidents where customers will have a compromised system, and every single one of them, it's been the customer's computer. And it's usually a result of buying a computer that came with that free antivirus, but then the antivirus expires at the end of the year, and you get that annoying little pop-up that says, click here to renew your antivirus, but you ignore it for 6 months, and that's 6 months of vulnerabilities that are happening.
Or 3 days.
Or 3 days, as was the case once. And it's that fast and that scary. That's how fast these viruses mutate. What's our biggest threat today is what's known as zero-day vulnerabilities, meaning there is no known signature to find that virus. So it doesn't matter if you are running the latest antivirus, it doesn't matter if you're fully patched, if you've gone out to Windows Update, nothing's going to find it. It's going to get on your system. And so the idea is to have layers of controls throughout your network. So in addition to training and education, having a good firewall, locking down ports, and then doing some operational things that Katie's going to talk about here in a second. The last thing I want to talk about is some of the external threats that we face. We've already kind of talked about phishing, mutable viruses, man-in-the-middle attacks. That's when someone injects some code into your computer and then essentially takes control of your session. We've seen this with online banking sessions. In fact, there's specific malware written specifically for online banking so that they can intercept your communications between your computer that's been compromised and the web server where online banking lives, and they sit in the middle. Quite literally, while you're checking your balances, they're trying to initiate funds transfers. And we've been able to stop that because we have communicated to our customer, hey, if you see something suspicious, stop, pick up the phone, call us. And that's exactly what they did. They were checking their balances, and all of a sudden, they got prompted for their token ID. We at Northern have two-factor authentication for high-value transactions, meaning that when you're about to send a $100,000 wire, it's going to prompt you for a token number. And that's either going to be a physical token, or it's going to be a soft token that's on your phone, but one way or another, or maybe a text message that you'll receive that you've registered for. And if you're just checking balances, you shouldn't be getting that prompt. And yet they landed on a page suddenly prompting for that, and it was a man-in-the-middle attack. They were compromised. Now, because they stopped and picked up the phone and said, this is weird, we were able to say, you're right, it is, you're compromised, we're going to go ahead and put a freeze in your accounts, open up some new accounts for you, and then we're going to recommend that you get that computer taken a look at and make sure it gets cleaned up properly and that you safeguard yourself by putting some of that anti-malware, antivirus software on. Next slide. So beyond our control, we have disaster recovery and business continuity. How many of you work in an office, own an office, are aware of the office that you live or work in that does backups by show of hands, data backups? Okay, how many of those, keep your hands up if you would, how many of those people do data restores? This is where a lot of hands start to drop. And the funny thing is, a lot of people say, yeah, we do backups. Well, how often do you restore that data to make sure that it actually works, that it's working as it should consistently? And at least 50% of the crowd usually starts to lower their hand, and it's because it just doesn't happen in reality. We had a disaster business continuity event back in 2012, literally 3 months after we just commissioned our very first secondary data center in Fairbanks. And that was quite an event for us because that was my first huge spend of capital at the bank. I had just started. This is almost 8 years ago, I guess. And we just commissioned the secondary site, and we had an event where someone very unintentionally, a database administrator, messed up. They restored a backup, put onto production. That's bad. That's not something you want to happen. And so we had to make the soul-searching decision of, do we enact our disaster recovery strategy? We did, and it worked beautifully. It turns out we replicated our data less than every 5 minutes between our two data centers. And so we were able to get back to only a 3-minute window where we had to manually reconcile those transactions. It took a couple of hours, and we were able to balance down to the penny. And that was an amazing success. And let me tell you, if I didn't have completely white hair by then, I surely did by the end of the event. But it taught us a lesson, and that was backing up your servers is important if you have a disaster. It's kind of obvious. But what else is important is making sure you have workstations for your mission-critical employees that need to process against those servers. That did not occur to us, and it doesn't occur to most people until you actually live through a disaster. So we had the servers sitting up in Fairbanks, and they were humming and doing their job, but we found that our workstations were slow because they were connecting from Anchorage to Fairbanks. So that inspired us to leverage what's known as virtual desktops as well as virtual servers, meaning our desktop computers actually live in Anchorage but are replicated to Fairbanks along with our servers. And what's cool about that is that no matter where we are, we can remotely access those workstations anywhere, even via iPads out in the field. And literally within 8 months, the September of that same year, we had a huge windstorm here in Anchorage. Most of the financial institutions in town were knocked out, but because we were running 100% virtually, all of our systems were up and operational, had zero hiccups. Every one of our branches that had power came up as soon as they were supposed to. And I got a frantic call in the middle of the night saying, what do we do? I said, nothing. Everything should be up and running. Just go to a branch that has power. And surely enough, it did. So as you're thinking about data and protection and information security, also think about what happens if there is an earthquake in Anchorage? What happens if my data isn't available due to a hardware failure or due to a human error? Because these things happen, and it's all part of a holistic information security program. So transitioning a little bit to some of the operational things that we have found, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Bates, and then I'm going to round off with some of the things that I've got as notes for our board. So, Katie.
Thanks, Ben. So I always like to go after Ben. Now that he's scared the heck out of you with all the threats that are out there, I'd like to talk about ways you can mitigate the risk. Because you don't want to, I mean, technology is a necessity. You don't want to lock things down in your place of business so tight that nobody can use the information, or your customers have a hard time doing business with you because you don't allow them to do anything. So one thing that's very important for any business is to perform annual risk assessment and to really take a look at, basically identify who are your customers, who are the people that you're doing business with, what information do they need, what information do you need to be efficient, and kind of write those items down. You also want to take a look at what payments either you're accepting or you're paying. How are you doing that? Are you using an online banking system? Are you using a software? Are you calling and doing things over the phone? Are you using credit cards? All of that information is important so that you look at what are the mitigating factors. If you've got a credit card that your person in the office is using to pay all your bills, where's that credit card located? You know, is it under their name? Is it stuck underneath a keyboard on somebody's office? Is it locked up? Do you have controls in place for your employees so they know how to do those different things? You also want to take a look at the controls in which you use for doing things online. Like Ben said, there's no silver bullet. You want to make sure, obviously, you have a good password. You want to make sure that your password is not a name in the English dictionary or in a dictionary. You want to make sure that you have special characters, you have numbers. It's something that you can remember, or if you can't remember, that you have an encrypted device that you, like 1Password we use, an app. You can have a good password and then keep your passwords inside. When Ben was mentioning that we had people come in and try to hack us, they also go into offices, any office that's open, and they'll just look for information that should be locked up. And the number one place that we find things is underneath the keyboard. Make sure you and your staff do not put your passwords under your keyboard, because I promise, if somebody gets in there, that's literally the first thing they're going to do. They're going to walk in and go, aha. If you want to do something really fun, put a note that says gotcha. And that way, you know, it's not your password. But you also want to make sure that you and your employees are not sharing passwords. There was a study done recently, and 65% of small business owners had admitted that they share passwords in their business. Sharing passwords is dangerous because, again, the users, you can't tell who the user is when they're doing something. It also could cause a situation, because if you share your password with someone, not only can they access whatever that is in your office, what are they going to do when they go home? What are they going to do when they go somewhere and they still have that information and somebody's putting pressure on them to give it to them? You just don't want to do that. So you want to make sure that you're not sharing passwords, you have good passwords, and your staff understand the why. That's very important. We have a list of different controls, so you want to look at things where you could put dual control in place. meaning if one single user was compromised, there's going to be a second user that is needed before a payment or information can go out. For instance, within our business online banking, we have what we call multi-factor authentication. How many of you have a lock on the front door of your house? How many of you have a deadbolt? So that's just one extra set of security. If somebody gets through your first door, they've got that extra set. That's basically what multi-factor authentication is. It takes something your password, and then it also challenges you with a one-time passcode or something that you have with a token code. So it's making sure if the password's compromised, there's still going to be one more step that could catch someone from getting in. Once they're in the system, I apparently like to click. Once they're in the system, you want to look at any time they're going to send money out, making that 2 separate user IDs. If you have, most companies that use online banking will have an administrator, and the administrator sets up users. You want to make sure that if you're the administrator, you're really only logging in with those power credentials to reset users or add users. You can create yourself a second user that would not have those permissions to do your normal day-to-day transactions. That way, if somebody compromises your credentials, they're not compromising everything, meaning they could go in and they could add new users. For wires and different payments, Ben alluded to limits. You want to make sure that your company, when you set up limits with your financial institution or internally, that the limits make sense. You don't want to go, oh, I need $1 million, because once a year we send a payment that's $1 million. Because if a bad guy gets in there, they're going to go to the top of your limit. You want to pick a limit that's close to what you normally spend. So if you're normally spending about $10,000 a month, then you want to keep your limit pretty close. If something were to come up and you needed more, you could always contact your financial institution and increase your limit temporarily. You also want to look at those of you that have like debit cards linked to accounts or ACH linked to accounts. You want to look at potentially something called account recon and positive pay. That will basically help you make sure that all the transactions coming in and out are accounted for. And then you can also look at even setting up an allocated account that's like specific to using your debit card. That way, if you had a debit card or something that was compromised, that account can easily be shut down and it doesn't affect your operating account or any more information. So it's really important, again, to have multiple controls. Now we're going to go into recommendations and best practices. I'm going to turn it back over to Ben.
So in addition to making sure that your software is up to date, which is one of the absolute main ways that you can ensure you're safeguarding yourself by letting it do those Windows updates, Office updates, antivirus updates, you also want to make sure that you're hitting all your ancillary software. So for example, if you are unfortunate enough to need to use Flash, you're going to want to keep Flash up to date because it is the #1 most vulnerable third-party asset that's on a computer that gets compromised. There's literally updates for it on a bi-weekly, monthly basis. Same thing with Java. Java is compromised all the time, so you absolutely want to make sure that you're keeping those third-party pieces of software up to date. You also need to make sure that not only do you have antivirus software, but that you're actually paying for or running the updates on it. It does you no good if it's out of date by even so much as a few days. As we talked about earlier, one of our customers literally let their antivirus expire within 3 days. They caught a virus and they became compromised. Try not to use public computers anywhere, and when you are using your device on a public network, try and use VPN if you have it, if your company is sophisticated enough to have a VPN. Also, Katie had mentioned password managers. How many of you use a password manager today? Handful. Let me tell you, these things are great. I use one that's called 1Password, and it's authenticated biometrically. It encrypts all of the data, and then it encrypts that again using Dropbox to synchronize between all of my devices. So my phone, my iPad, my work computer, my home computer, all has the same thing. And that's a really good thing for me because according to this, I have 735 passwords. Now you may ask yourself, then what are you doing with 735 passwords? Well, I mean, let's see, I work a bank, so there's some of that. But the truth is, for every single site that I use, I have a different set of passwords. Why would I do that?
So when your 1Password's hacked, then you don't need other ones.
Exactly.
And those password generators, those password managers also generate random ones for you.
Yes.
And it's like you cannot screw that up.
Yes, exactly.
LastPass.
LastPass is a good one. 1Pass from AgileBits is the one that I use. KeyPass is another one. And Rupert Murdoch, any of you guys heard that name? So Rupert Murdoch was over in London, and all of a sudden he had a pretty big hack of his network. Why? Because he used the same password on his work network that he did on an online shopping site. When they compromised inevitably the online shopping site, they had his credentials and they took a guess, and it paid off in a very big way. So how hard is it to hack your password? Well, I was back in, let's see, I was in from 96 to 2001 in the U.S. Air Force, and I was sitting there in the communications squadron, and one of my comrades came up and said, there's this new hacking software, Lockcrack. It's amazing, it's gonna blow your mind, it's gonna hack you. And I said, there's no way, I have the coolest password ever. It's like 15 digits long, it's got, zeros instead of O's and ones instead of L's, and it's a name of a place, and it's very obscure. And while I was sitting here bragging about how he's never gonna get my password, he started getting this really, really nasty Cheshire cat grin on his face, and I'm looking at him like, this is not going to be good for me. I turn around and there's my password in all its glory displayed on my computer screen. And this was back in, the late 90s. Imagine how much better it's gotten. You mentioned don't use a word in the dictionary. Why? Anybody want to take a guess? Spiritual. Yes. So the hackers use programs like Lockcrack, and they basically use high computational resources to take Webster's unabridged dictionary of multiple languages and then run the encryption algorithm against it so that they get the encrypted hashes. And then when they get a dump of your company's user IDs and passwords, which all you have to do is connect up to a network to get it, they take those two values and they do a very quick compare. And if you have something that's in the dictionary as opposed to something that's randomly generated by a password manager, you're going to have a bad time, I guarantee you. So it's really important that you have those upper lowercase characters, special characters, etc. Some other notes that I have that I thought might be interesting. So I can get on my password manager here. Trusted levels of credentials. On your computer, you have an administrator account. How many of you are the administrators of your own computers? At home. At home, yes. Which means that if you accidentally click on a link, you have the authority and the permission to install bad stuff on your computer. It's convenient because you never get prompted for those credentials when you're installing a new driver or when you're doing updates, but it's very inconvenient in that through no fault of your own, you may get an email, and all you have to do is open that email. That's it, just open it. And if it's a zero-day vulnerability, it's going to infect you. So we highly recommend that you have an administrator account that you never use unless you actively need to, and then you log in normally with your unprivileged user account. The same thing applies to your online banking resources. It's having the day-to-day unprivileged account for your normal stuff, but then when you need to approve something, you escalate to that administrator level. Also, make sure that if you have family members of the teenage age that like to go out and explore the wonderful wide world of the internet, that they're using a separate computer than the computer you use for your online banking. That seems to be a significant trend of compromised computers. I'll let your imaginations kind of wander on that one. Consider using OpenDNS. It's a Cisco umbrella solution. It's free to use. And basically what you do is you point your DNS settings at the OpenDNS service, you register for their account, they walk you through it, it's pretty easy. And what that does for you is DNS is the magical thing that takes www.microsoft.com and translates it into an IP address. Because if we all had to remember IP addresses, we'd never go anywhere on the internet, right? So DNS is kind of important, and the reason is because the malware software out there will typically use a DNS name in order to have command and control over your computer. So they infect your computer, and then they tell your computer, okay, go out to maliciousite.com, right? Well, if your computer can't resolve maliciousite.com, no problem. Now it can't be remotely controlled. So OpenDNS is a service that will umbrella you from that and provide services that safeguard you against that type of a takeover. And again, they're free, so it's a pretty good service. If you have specific questions, I'll stick around and be happy to answer them for you. I also recommend using separate email addresses for your work, personal, online shopping, and throwaway accounts for when you're registering for free events that gets you swag, but you don't ever want to hear from them again. When available, use two-factor authentication. It's a great service. If you have the option to enable it, it's a good thing. On your Apple devices, by default, it's not enabled, but you have the option of enabling two-factor authentication so that when you sign on with your Apple ID, it'll send you a code via your mobile device, your iPad, your home computer, whatever, and that way it adds another layer of security, like the two locks on your front door. And lastly, don't hack back. Unless you've gone to a lot of schooling or you're living on the dark web, you probably are just ticking off the hackers, and it's never a good idea to poke the bear, so don't be that guy. As much as you want to, taunting them never works out well. But those are some things that you can do to help safeguard yourself against some of the threats that we talked about earlier. With that, I think we're going to open it up to your questions and anything that you'd like to learn about, or any questions you might have about what we've presented today. And feel free to kind of knock out anything.
Does is Google DNS have the same protection as OpenDNS?
It's not the same.
No, I think it's just for the speeds.
Yeah, I would recommend using OpenDNS. It specifically is built for you to be able, when there is a command and control event, where there's a malware site that's using a DNS name, they will globally block it, and it's used by a lot of businesses out there.
Does it slow you down at all?
Not at all. It's very fast.
It's supposed to be fast.
I use it.
It's supposed to be like Google. It's just faster than the protection. You don't have to register for them. You just punch in the DNS.
You do have to register, but only if you're going to use content filtering. So if you have, for instance, teenage kids and you want to be able to say, I don't want them to go to certain types of sites, you can check those types of sites. Otherwise, all you do is point to their DNS servers and
you can do that in the router too.
We purchased brand new HP computers and found they came brand new in a box with malware installed.
Yes.
Is there a resource? Luckily, we did not deploy them. Our IT guys started re-ghosting them and figured out that they had some deep embedded bad stuff and we got rid of it. Is there a resource for those of us who aren't IT guys and want to buy a new computer at home, a place to check, things to look at for strange things like that?
That's a great question, and to be perfectly candid, I don't recommend anyone because I'm not a trusting person.
I wonder why.
When I get a new computer, I format it and I reload it with the operating system from scratch.
That's the only way to do it.
That way I know what's on it and I know it's only what I want to be on there. So, yeah.
Well, with new computers, you get a lot of stuff on there you don't want.
Right, a lot of it is advertising stuff and that annoys the heck out of me. So I just assume wipe it and start over. It's a really good idea to have external drives and have the strategy of building your computer's main hard drive to be as fast as possible, because that tends to be the slowest thing in the skeleton of a computer these days is storage. And that way you can just put your operating system and your applications on that, but then have an external drive for all your data. And that way if the computer ever goes sideways, so easy. Yeah, and it's part of your disaster recovery business continuity strategy on a basic level. Yeah. Any other questions, thoughts? Concerns, anything home or personal, work related? I won't keep you. I want to thank you all for your attention. Again, thank you online for joining us. And if you do have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us at Northern Bank. We like to serve the communities in which we live. We're all neighbors, and whether you bank with us now or will in the future, hopefully, we appreciate your time and helping keep us secure.
Thank you.
Thank you.